today's journey through disappearing London, I'll be sampling the country life in the heart of the East End. Throwing my weight behind a threatened London pastime. And finding out what this knees up was all about. But first, I'm going underground. Today's London streets show very little sign of the once thriving tram network that used to take so many Londoners to work. All the overhead wires have gone. You could search for days before finding a bit of tram track, but there is one last reminder, buried beneath the streets of Holborn. In the summer of 1952, Londoners said goodbye to an old friend. For more than half a century, trams have been a common sight across the city. They were once the capital's favourite form of transport, but by the 50s, the bus was boss. The last week of the trams was marked by nostalgic celebrations across the city. Like thousands of others, Fred Ivey wanted to be a part of the action. He grabbed his camera and rushed to catch the last tram through the Kingsway Tunnel here in Holborn.
There you are, there's the two trams.
Amazing.
This is the one that's reversed, and this is the one that's about to reverse. And there I am standing on the platform.
How extraordinary. Was that quite an emotional moment?
Well, all these moments, although we made a big thing of the final days, they were very sad moments. But the fact of the matter is, of course, you never actually realised that till the following day when you suddenly found they weren't here anymore.
And London Transport had made you aware that this was going to be the last day of the trams down the subway?
London Transport publicity did make quite a lot of the end of the trams, probably more that it was a great success, the fact that they were getting rid of these dreadful old trams and bringing in these shiny new buses. But to be fair, when the last trams came off, they did in fact proclaim on the sides on July the 5th, we say goodbye to London.
I've come to explore the tunnel where Fred took his last tram ride. It's easy to miss the entrance to this place at street level, but once you're down the ramp, you soon forget the hustle and bustle of modern London and enter a very different world. My guide today is Nick Catford. So Nick, what first drew your interest to this rather spooky little tunnel?
Well, I always knew of the existence of the tram tunnel, and living and working in London, travelling to work by bus, you can see this from the top of the bus. You saw the tram tracks going down into the ground.
Which you still can.
Which is still here, yes.
Yeah.
And it was always my ambition to get in, and I came in here for the first time in, I think it was about 1995. We brought a party of about 50 in, and everyone was amazed. It was a place we'd always wanted to see, and straight ahead of us, one of the original stations.
The subway was opened for business in 1906. A fleet of single-deck cars was purchased for the astronomical sum of £750 each to carry passengers through the tunnel all the way to its exit at Waterloo Bridge. The route was so popular that in the 1930s, the single-deckers were replaced by two-tier trams, which meant the tunnel roof had to be raised. And this is the actual platform we're approaching.
This is one of the original platforms. You notice it's somewhat lower than a train platform, so the passengers could just step straight onto the trams. We've got the original tiling, which dates from 1931. We've still got the advertising hoardings here, passengers facing the hoardings. And round here, the stairs, the original entrance into the station. The steps are still here. There were two entrances to a refuge in the middle of Kingsway. There's a grill. You can still see that grill on the surface. Shine the torch down. The steps are still here, leading you down into the station.
You can almost imagine the people here in their coats and scarves, staring at the Bovril posters, waiting for the trams. I can almost hear one. And over there, Nick, I spy the ghost of a symbol any Londoner would recognise.
Anyone who's travelled on the tube will know that shape instantly, the London Transport Roundel. That's where the station name would have been. If you look up there, actually, there's a high-level one, because remember, these were double-deck trams, so you'd be looking out of your window, and there's a high-level roundel to tell you you're at Holborn Station.
And paint us a picture of life down here in the heyday of the tram.
It was hustle and bustle. There were benches here, adverts. In fact, you can just see the remains of one of the posters on that hoarding over there.
Oh, yes.
And when the tunnel was rebuilt, when the subway was rebuilt in 1931, it was busy. There was one tram a minute here. 5,000 trams a week came through this station, so it would have been a very busy place right in the heart of London.
After the tunnel closed, it was used as a storage depot, flood control centre and even a film set. Today, it's hard to believe that this place was once one of the busiest stations in the whole capital. There is talk of reintroducing trams into London, but even if that happens, it's unlikely that the Kingsway Tunnel will have a role in the next chapter of London's love affair with the tram. So what is it, if we were to be frank about this rather smelly old tunnel, that you think's worth preserving, Nick?
Well, it's quite unique. It's an important piece of British transport history. It's the only, not only the only remaining tram station in London, it's the only remaining tram station anywhere in the country from that period. Look at everything that's here, the tiles, the hoardings, the roundels. What more could you ask for? It's absolutely vital that this is preserved for posterity. We must keep it.
It's strange to think of just up there, modern city life going about its business. But I wonder just how many people sitting on buses realise that underneath them is this wonderful piece of London transport history just rotting away.
Now a kind of lawn billiards called Mel, a favourite pastime of King Charles II, still played at Hampstead.
Think of pub games today, and you'd probably come up with pool or darts or maybe something electronic. But back in the 40s, they did things with a little more panache. Those dapper-looking chaps were manfully pursuing sporting excellence here at the Freemasons' Arms near Hampstead Heath. Sadly, the Pall Mall Court disappeared some years ago. It's buried somewhere under here. But elsewhere in the premises, there's an old pub game that's still hanging on in there, down in the basement. This is London Skittles, a game that's been played in the basement here since the 1930s. Back then, it was popular in hundreds of drinking dens across the city. Peter, how did you get into this crazy-looking game?
Well, I used to play pool upstairs in the 70s, and the alley had been closed for a while, and then it reopened, and I came down maybe once or twice in the first few years of it being open, and then I came more regularly in the 80s, early 80s.
And was it a game that you had any idea about before you stumbled into this basement?
No, none at all.
I must say, it does look like quite a strenuous effort, though. You're talking about quite a big thing there you're chucking about.
It's not strenuous. It's timing and placement. The women quite often throw better than the men. It's a sport for all people.
And as a sport for all people, how many members have you got in the club at the moment?
That's not fair. Well, we're down to about maybe 15 members.
Yeah.
At a push. It's very tricky. I mean, our grip on existence is very tenuous, to say the least.
It's a far cry from the glory days of the sport, if you can call it a sport. But joking aside, when we're looking around at the pictures in here, this obviously was a very popular sport and goes a long way back in the culture of the pub world of London.
At its peak in London, there were probably about 200 pubs playing it. It started off on the Frost Fairs in the 1600s. I think there were pictures with people playing Skittles, the same game we're playing, where you're lobbing a cheese on the frozen Thames. All that disappeared. Probably started after the First World War, when people didn't come back, and then got worse Second World War, when television arrived and things like that. So it's been in steady decline since probably the First World War.
The modern pub industry has little room for what is now a minority sport. After all, these alleys take up useful drinking space. Today, the Freemasons is one of just a couple of pubs where you can still get to grips with the secret of Skittles. So, we're looking at the tools of the trade here, Peter.
This is one of the cheeses. This is one of the larger cheeses. They're made out of lignum vitae. It's endangered wood, prescribed. You can't get it anymore in the country. Feel the weight, it's quite heavy.
Cool, blimey, it is as well, yes.
That one weighs about 10 pounds, thereabouts.
So not only the players are hard to come by, the cheeses themselves.
We've got enough to keep us going. It's not the cheeses that are the problem, it's the people coming to play it.
So we've got the cheese. What's the next bit of the equipment down here? We've got the Skittles, I presume. So look at these battered old things. They almost look prehistoric.
They're pretty old. This pin here, for example, dates from 1931. It's got the stamp on it there, and the ASA stamps to show that it's the regulation shape.
So these are the Skittles. So all you're telling me is I've got to knock over these few little lumps This great big piece of hardwood here.
Come over there.
Let's go. So, Peter, I've assumed the position. I'm properly attired, and assuming that I'm going to knock any number of those skittles down, who picks them up again?
2 stickers, and they're the people who are going to play the next game. So it's a bit like darts, where you chalk before you play your next game.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
Secondly, you do realise that the future of this game rests in my measly, weedy arm here.
I have utmost faith that you're going to get at least one down.
How dare you, sir? By my calculation, I must now be one of the top 100 skittle players in the world. In fact, I'm probably one of the only 100 skittle players in the world. Put this in the Olympics, and I reckon we've got a gold sewn up. Coming up next, join me for a spot of window shopping and find out why the London Olympics will mean bad news for this green and pleasant place. This must be one of the busiest shopping streets anywhere in the world. It's hard to believe that Oxford Street was once a residential district. It was only in the late 19th century that the front doors were replaced by shop fronts. This place on New Oxford Street is a rare survivor from the old days, and a good bit more stylish than most modern shop fronts. It can't have changed much since Mr. Smith first opened for business, although neither has the English weather, which may explain why it's still here. Once you bought your brolly, you might have sauntered east to this place. Well-heeled Victorians would have indulged in a spot of window shopping in elegant parades like this one, Wogan Walk. But whether they would have had time for a Chinese massage is another matter altogether. Well-preserved streets like this are less common than they used to be, but traditional shop fronts haven't completely disappeared. And how about this for a reminder of days gone by? This ladies' outfitters in Kentish Town has clearly decided to grow old gracefully, just like its customers. Every shop front tells a story. Somehow, I don't think this one's going to have a happy ending. But the future of this place in Richmond still hangs in the balance. The owners called time on the business here several years ago. Since then, the building stood empty. Apart from a few sad reminders of happier times. But in its day, Matthie's brought a touch of glitz and glamour to the neighbourhood. The Art Deco shopfront dates from the 1930s, when local baker Reg Matthie created his mini catering empire. By the 50s, business was booming. Reg and his family lived on the premises, and his children often helped out with the customers.
There were always queues of people in the shop, and as a child, yes, it was my playground in a way, and as I got old enough and my nose came above the counter, I think I was allowed to serve some of the customers, and whether I got the sums right or not, I don't know.
The stylish shop front was matched by the paintwork on the delivery vans. The early run was especially busy for the drivers.
In the mornings, everything was very busy because everyone was packing up trays full of all the orders that had been phoned in either the day before or that morning if they'd forgotten to ring in. So there's a great sort of hustle and bustle going on at the back of the shop, and then the front of the shop, obviously the customers were just coming in for their normal bread and cakes or whatever they were having at that stage.
As the bakery flourished, so too did the glitzy function rooms on the top floor. They hosted lots of local do's, plus family parties like this one in 1948. Go on, Grandad! I'm told these ladies were acting up for the cameras, which is an excuse I intend to file away for future use, Your Honour. The business was a local institution for several decades, but as the 80s loomed, the icing came off the cake.
Times were changing. Supermarkets were beginning to open, people's whole habits were changing. Gradually, there wasn't the demand for a shop of that size in that particular location.
After 70 years of service, Matthie's shut up shop for good in 2001. The building's been empty ever since, and although it's been listed, debate still rages about its future. It's not only the locals who have strong views, some conservation groups have also taken up the cause.
There are no more cafes like this, and I think that the time has come for it to work as a cafe again. People very much are enjoying coffee houses and tea houses again, and it can work as that. It's a very, very rare Art Deco shop front. It's just a fabulous place.
I'd love to stop for tea, but I can't. Instead, I'm heading east. This is the Lower Lee Valley in East London. In the next few years, this whole area will be redeveloped in preparation for the 2012 Olympics. Just a hop, skip and a jump over there will be the main athletics stadium, and where I'm standing will be the heart of the Grand Olympic Park. And in the process, everything you see today will disappear. This piece of the East End has never been particularly picturesque. For the most part, it's an untidy mishmash of canals and factories, roads and railways. Most people wouldn't be too sad to see some of this industrial stuff go, but tucked away behind these warehouses and empty factories are some hidden gems it would be really sad to see disappear. This walkway over the River Lee feels a bit like crossing a drawbridge. Leaving behind the industrial hustle and bustle of East London, I'm entering a secret East End garden. These are the Manor Park allotments. They've been tucked away here for more than 80 years, but they may just have seen their last summer. Under the latest plan for the Olympic Park, this place blocks the route between the coach parks and the various stadiums and arenas. Some of the plot holders have been campaigning to save it from the bulldozers. But what's it doing here in the first place?
It came about through the foresight of a guy called Major Villiers, or as he's known up here, the Right On. And he was a local, very wealthy, philanthropic landowner. And he did a lot for the poor around here. And one of them was setting up these allotments, as well as, ironically, setting up a boys' sports club, which was sort of based mostly across the river. But all their dads and families used to come up here and grow the veg to keep the sports boys going.
And so the great irony, of course, is the old Right On was doing this for sports people, and in fact that's the very subject that's going to put you out of business.
Exactly, yeah.
The man who started this magical place, Arthur Villiers, mixed in some pretty elevated company. Well, I say, this is a tremendous old picture, isn't it?
Fabulous, isn't it?
Yes, we've got
Yeah.
Winston Churchill here.
You've got Winston Churchill, because they were buddies. The Right On, this is Right On,
Right On.
was very well connected. The Right On was a director at Barings Bank, apparently, and had quite a fortune stashed away, but lived very humbly, I hear, apart from his collection of cars.
So what would the old Right Honourable Arthur Villiers think about the Olympic Village being here?
Well, he was fiercely protective of his projects. There's a good story about when the Oxo factory that was over the other side of the river wrote to him and said, we're interested in expanding our factory and, we'd like to buy your land. And he wrote back and said, I'm interested in expanding my allotments. Can I buy your factory? So I think he would have been, banging on Tony Blair's door.
Major Villiers wasn't the only one to believe in the social value of allotments. They've been part of the London landscape for years. The story of London's allotments really begins in the First War, when food shortages meant the creation of thousands of new plots. But then there was a new surge of growth in the Second World War, when Winston Churchill's Dig for Victory campaign led to allotments springing up in the most unlikely places. Tom's one of several plot holders who first came here during the war. He started by helping out on his dad's patch and hasn't looked back since. He can still remember the visits of old Major Villiers himself.
He used to come up in a black cab, which he owned, a Lamborghini, which he owned, and he had another big car over the grounds over there where he lived. Millionaire, and he lived over the grounds in Hackney.
Yeah.
Quite a character.
If we'd have come through here, you'd have been here and we'd have said to you, let's the right on, you'd have called us a liar.
Yeah.
Scrap the old coat like this. I'm riding a rusty push bike that I wouldn't have got on in case it broke. But he
It's a
did.
mooch around with sandals
Oh, yeah.
on. It's quite a character.
Yeah.
I still think it's kept most people alive up there, most of the people. I'm 83,
he was
and I'll still say
90.
this sort of thing is what's done it, you know.
Yeah.
The plot holders have been offered space on other allotments, but it takes a lifetime to create what they enjoy here.
What you see up here, we did ourselves.
Yeah.
But you'll never create this again. You'll never create this no more, I don't think so.
You won't. Impossible. It's impossible.
Even the offer of a few £100 compensation isn't enough to change the mind of Manor Park regulars like Hassan, who's tended his plot here for 16 years.
They offer us £300, it's £20. What's £300? If they offer us even £20,000, I don't want to go. We don't need money. You know, compensation money. We don't need them. We want to stay here.
The Olympics will obviously bring some much-needed investment to a rather run-down corner of East London, and the buildings and parks they leave behind will surely improve the quality of life for local people. But it does seem rather sad that in the process, a very special place like this will be simply wiped off the map. Next time on Disappearing London, I discover why the pub gym is an endangered species and find out what one of these is doing in the heart of Brixton.